Okay, we're back in Jude, verse 5 again. This is episode 23 of Was the Book of Jude, written after 70 AD, Theodor Zahn, and the Fall of Jerusalem. Theodor Zahn is my new best friend. After reading some commentaries, I found out that he shares some of what we believe here, that Jude, verse 5 is indeed talking about the fall of Jerusalem. So who is Theodor Zahn? A German Protestant theologian and biblical scholar. He's gone to be with the Lord. He also believes that Jude verse 5 is speaking of the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. We're going to take you to his introduction to the New Testament, but first we'll quickly read our passage here just for a refresher. Now I want to remind you, although you are fully aware of this, that Jesus, having once for all saved a people out of the land of Egypt, the second time destroyed those who did not believe. With that, we're going to take it over to Theodor Zahn and let him tell us what he thinks about this verse. He says, verse 5 seems to indicate a time subsequent to the great judgment of the year 70. He's saying that Jude's writing after 70 AD. Jude begins his statement in verse 5 by saying that he is recalling what the readers know, and that this is emphasized by appeal to the comprehensive knowledge which the readers already possess, all of which implies that he is not citing facts known to the reader, but that he can also count upon their understanding of brief or obscure hints. What he's saying, he's pointing to the fact that Jude says that his audience was fully aware of these things, which sounds like some of them may even have experienced it to some extent. We don't know. But the first thing he recalled is this, that Jesus, after having saved a people out of Egypt, the second time destroyed them that believed not. That a fact from the Old Testament is here meant is doubtful, says Zahn. I like how he says that. But the most important reason for rejecting this interpretation is the impossibility of finding within the Old Testament the familiar second instance in which God destroyed those who were redeemed from Egypt but remained unbelieving, in comparison to a first instance, equally well known, in which he did the same thing. The original readers readily understood that Jude was contrasting the judgment of the generation of Israel that came out of Egypt, who, with a few happy exceptions, speaking of Joshua and Caleb, perished in the wilderness for their unbelief without having seen the land of promise. He goes on to say that throughout the New Testament, from the discourses of the Baptists to the vision of Revelation, we find expressed, indicated, or presupposed the idea that Christ has accomplished a redemption comparable to the liberation of Israel from Egypt. Jude could say that Jesus had visited this judgment upon the unbelieving mass of the Jewish people because they had been judged by the testimony of Jesus, which they rejected, and because the threatening prophecy of Jesus about the evil and adulterous generation had been fulfilled by the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Jude, therefore, must have written after this event. I agree. So among Jewish Christian churches, especially in whose minds the memory of this catastrophe was fresh, no misunderstanding was possible. And for them, in particular, was the judgment upon the unbelieving majority of their own people the most powerful incentive to hold fast their faith and to maintain it even against the temptation to which they had recently been subjected, the temptation to accept a so-called Christianity which really denied the only Lord of the Christians and perverted into heathen immorality the state of grace in which his redeemed servants stood. And he just goes on to say, for a matter of dating here, he says if Peter died in the year 64, assuming the year 75 as the approximate date for the composition of Jude, a period of from 10 to 15 years had elapsed since Peter had written 2 Peter. So with that, we'll close it out. Again, he brings up some important points there about how Jude is definitely borrowing from 2 Peter, and 2 Peter was writing prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, prior to the second coming, and Jude is writing after the event. Now, Zahn doesn't go on to say that he's like a full preterist. He's just saying that he believes that this verse 5 was Jude looking back on the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So again, I just hope you found that encouraging as much as I did. It's nice to know that there's some other people who don't think this is a completely crazy idea that we're discussing here. But again, as always, appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, just let me know. And until next time, contend earnestly for the faith, which was once for all delivered to the saints in 70 AD, and God bless.